Yes, thanks, Rajiv. Ryan Vanderveer, and as you mentioned, I'm the Azure sales lead for Canada, working alongside Cree, making sure our SMBs are penetrating the markets and achieving their best results.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Thanks, Cree. So let's quickly jump into the topic that we have today at hand. And what I wanted to look at really is that, and maybe Kriya, I just want to start with you. There has been a lot of buzz around generative AI lately. Of course, it's everywhere. When you look at social media, LinkedIn, everybody's talking about generative AI. And if you look at this report from McKinsey, it's actually talking about the economic benefits of generative AI to the extent of 6.1 to 7.9 trillion dollars. That's like huge. That's massive. So I guess my first question to you, Kree, was that is this just another shiny new thing, or based on your experience with the customers that you're working with in Microsoft, do you see any real substance over here and staying power behind this whole generative AI revolution, so to say?
Yeah, fantastic question to start with, Rajiv. And AI has been around with us for a very long time. But what makes this moment in time quite significant is it's the first time that AI is able to generate content for us, and that's what's been most astounding. And I often get faced with this question, especially from customers saying, "Hey, you're within this tech industry and you're very famous for hyping up hype cycles." And let's be honest, that is the truth, right? And we've had many of those. We've had the cloud, which came to bear, and that was one that we predicted accurately. And most notably, in the recent past, we've had things like the metaverse and NFTs and so forth. But here's why generative AI and this age of AI right now is critical. I didn't see large organizations such as the big SIs or even governments for that matter rushing out to build practices and investing billions of dollars as it came to be around NFTs and the metaverse. But they are doing that around this generative AI wave. So, yes, I think it's definitely here to stay without a doubt. And the impact that it's going to have on GDP conservatively is around $16 trillion of GDP that we don't have today, which can be recognized over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's pretty significant. And we've seen massive adoption across all industries, from things like content creation all the way through to like automation within domains such as customer support. And the rate of advancement is absolutely staggering. And even for folks like ourselves, I'm sure you'd agree, it's pretty hard to keep up with that. But we are genuinely really just scratching the surface of the potential right now.
Yeah, and I guess that's why what we are also seeing is that there's also a significant increase in adoption, right? And I think that's because of the fact that people are actually finding a lot of benefit from this technology. So this is a chart which I saw from McKinsey. It was very interesting, and it basically charts out the adoption of AI and then what's the impact of generative AI on that. And if you see, it's been lingering around the 60s for a long period of time. Of course, generative AI came into play significantly only, I would say, last year. I mean, it's been last couple of years, and ever since that has happened, the adoption of AI technologies as a whole, and you mentioned that AI has been around for a long period of time, jumped from 56% to 72%, and then that has been driven largely by the adoption of generative AI, which has jumped from 33% to already 65%. And this was kind of towards the beginning of 2024, and I think we have seen much more progress around this as we have gone through the year. However, one of the things, Kree, also is that all these numbers that get reported are mostly for enterprises. And we have seen the adoption of generative AI for enterprises, which are larger organizations. There are large initiatives. There are large teams which are working on these, and then there are rollouts which are happening across the organization. But I also wanted to, given the fact that you and Ryan are both looking at the SMB sector, wanted to look at the SMB, and I went through the report that was published, the Work Trend Index annual report by Microsoft and LinkedIn. And when I saw this report, one of the things that jumped out to me was that it seems that the SMBs are struggling a little bit. So, a couple of things that if we look at it over here, while 79% of SMB leaders say that they believe that AI's adoption is critical for their company to remain competitive. So they're not they're not worried, or they're not thinking about whether this is important for me or not, because the large majority are saying that it is important. But then 61% of these leaders also say that their company currently lacks a vision or plan to implement AI. So that's significant. The issue is not whether it's useful for us, but they see these challenges in implementation. And on the other hand, that report also talks about, uh, you know, 80% of the SMB users using bring your own AI tools at work. So they know that these technologies are useful for them. They want to use it. They're not getting it from their organization, so they're bringing it and they're keeping it under wraps. So I think those are kind of some of the challenges that we're facing in SMBs. And the other piece which I also looked at was, and again, it's the same report that it's really highlighting a significant gap in terms of training of their employees. Again, they understand that they need to train their employees. They believe that with minimal training, these people can actually use these tools effectively, but only one third of the SMB users have received training. And that's not just impacting the adoption, but it's also impacting the career moves, and it's impacting the retention within them, where 55% of SMB leaders are concerned about having enough talent to fill the roles in the next year. So these are some of the kind of trends that I picked up from that report. And the question that I really had for you, Cree, is what is holding SMBs back? What are the main challenges that these businesses are facing in adopting generative AI, given that they are convinced that they should adopt?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question that you pose here, Rajiv, because we can't escape it right now. There's so much of news around this all the time. Like every
Yeah.
single news article or site or publication that you read is speaking to AI, and we're at a very interesting point right now where it's no longer a nice to have. If anything, it's an absolute imperative to do this. So many organizations are being forced into this in a good sense because
Mhm.
our customers are demanding it. But the volume and veracity of information around this is what can sometimes feel paralyzing, right? That rapid pace of change in this AI space. And this is also, it's bookended in terms of a number of things. So number one, like significant costs to ensure that there's a strong return on investment for these organizations, number one. Number two, knowing which AI solutions to go after. And
Mhm.
then this aspect that you spoke about in terms of a lack of talent, right? And if there is talent there, that it comes at such a premium. And then also there's this aspect around mobility associated with that. Not to mention like training and support, and critically security and privacy concerns as well, which are now going up. I read a report the other day where the sample of SMBs that were taken into account, 40% of them said that they had security or privacy concerns. That number just a few weeks ago has gone up north of 70%. So we see us indexing higher on that. Also, identifying high value use cases that are pertinent to these businesses. These are the real barriers for some of these small organizations.
Mhm.
And it can make taking those first steps really quite challenging and daunting for them. But this is where you need a value added partner, both from a technology standpoint as well as from a value realization perspective. And Zyton fits squarely into that. We've had some great success stories that I'd like to share potentially with the audience on here at Gaia Tech. You and the team helped unlock the power of GitHub Copilot. You paired that with a prompt engineering practice that you empowered them with, and it delivered like faster coding, greater collaboration, and ultimately enhanced quality for the end customer. At Pinchin, the team leaned in with advisory and consultancy services for the leadership team there, helping them plot a course to the desired end state, underpinned with our Microsoft technology M365 Copilot, as well as Azure OpenAI. So it's not just about this value realization piece, it's about advisory and strategy as well. Tell me, how are you accomplishing these results?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what you are saying ties into it, and working with SMBs is slightly different as compared to enterprise. As you're aware, enterprises have access to a much larger talent pool. They have access to large consulting firms which they can work with. So the approach that we have really been taking with SMBs is again kind of look at addressing some of the concerns that they have around high cost or the increased ROI or the challenges related to ROI by three things that we look at doing. So first and foremost, we work closely with them to build a solid business case for the generative AI initiatives. And that's kind of the starting point, to have that kind of solid business case. And when we jump into implementation, we are looking at doing that in a frugal, cost effective manner. And I think the final thing that we are doing is that, given the pace that you talked about of the technology, we do want to keep things a bit fluid and iterate frequently. So we do not want to commit huge amount of resources to certain initiatives which might not remain relevant, let's say a few months later. So I think those are the kind of three things that we are doing. And let me just address this a little bit more in detail. So when it comes to building the business case, and I think that's the starting point for any organization to create a solid roadmap for their generative AI initiatives. So that's where we start with. And one of the things that we do is that we don't want to focus on the tools. There are lots of shiny tools out there. Everybody claims to do magic, but it's not really about looking at these tools and saying, okay, here's this new tool in the market, a generative AI powered tool. What can I do with it? It's more about look at your own problems, your own opportunities within the organization, where are you facing the challenges, and then figure out if there is a tool in the market which can solve that. So that's kind of just reversing the situation, not focus on the tool, but look at the opportunities and the issues that you're facing within the organization. The second thing that we are also doing in business case, in terms of developing the business case, is starting with education. Again, because these technologies are new, there's a lot of confusion around what's generative AI, how is it different from AI, well, how is it different from machine learning, and all of those kind of concepts, right? And that too, we want to start top down, because many a times we have heard senior executives kind of giving the directive to people in the organization, hey, you know what, we want to do something about generative AI, go figure out what we can do about it. That's not where we want the senior exec team to be. Where we want them to be is that they have a broad understanding of the technologies, and then they can start looking at the opportunities and the challenges which are in the organization, say, okay, these are the areas where we would like to explore whether generative AI can make a difference. And that kind of leads to the next thing, which is that when we are starting to look at identifying the use cases, we are involving the entire organization in terms of building these use cases, right? And once that happens, then use a robust ranking criteria so that we can identify and bubble up those use cases which are most promising, which again goes back to the ROI that you were talking about earlier. So these would typically be use cases which are not very difficult to implement, which give a good return, and they're not very expensive to implement. Now, it all sounds very good, and all use cases will not be in that category, but there will be some. And as we start implementing those use cases, we can start getting productivity benefits from those use cases, which can then be invested. That saving can be invested in use cases which require more investment. So that's what I think it's really about. And that's the first thing, like, do we have that kind of a business case? Because often it would be that maybe the CEO or the CMO or the CSO gives that directive to the team, saying that, hey, you know what, I've heard a lot of good things about generative AI. Why don't you go and figure out how we can use, whatever product it might be, Chat GPT or Copilot or Copilot for GitHub or any of these products, right? And when the team comes back with the solution, then it goes to the CFO, and the CFO is like, well, this seems to be very expensive. Where's the ROI? And that's where the business case becomes very important, right? So that's really the first hurdle that we have to cross, and that's where we work very closely with the companies in terms of saying that, okay, let's first get a solid business case. Let's bubble up the best use cases for you where you can get maximum benefit. The next step after that is that once we have the broad business case or broad use cases that we know, then it's about looking at, okay, now what's the right solution? And we like to think of it in three different layers. First and foremost, we try to look at, is there an embedded SaaS solution which can help us with this particular use case? Like, you have various copilots from Microsoft, right? Because these might be fairly cost effective and they already are integrated with the solution. Like Copilot already has access to Microsoft Graph and it has access to all the semantic search and all of that. So that's the first kind of port of call, saying that, okay, do we have an embedded SaaS solution which can address the requirements that we have in the use case? If we are not able to do that, then the next thing that we try to do is see if we can use prompt engineering, develop tailored prompts to get the desired result that we are looking for in that specific use case. Again, this is kind of a two-step process where first we would use the latest models. We don't worry too much about, what does the prompt really look like. But once we have gotten the result that we want, then we want to kind of iterate with those models and go to the model that is giving us the results with the lowest cost, and also do a little bit more of prompt engineering and make those prompts more compact. So, first get the functionality in, and then after that, start looking at how you can, iterate and bring the costs down. And if we are not able to do it using prompt engineering, that's when we fall back on retrieval augmented generation. And again, I know that Azure has a lot of tools for this. Microsoft has a lot of tools for this, and then kind of use RAG for that. Beyond this, I don't think there is any business case, at least that I have come up with in SMBs, where, for example, we want to do fine tuning or we want to develop a foundation model from scratch. I mean, those are much more expensive alternatives, and there may be some very specific situations where that's required, but otherwise we are able to kind of accomplish the results using these. And as I mentioned, Microsoft has a lot of tools to help users go through this, like look at the SaaS solutions, look at prompt engineering, look at RAG, and maybe I'll just invite Ryan to talk a little bit about the Microsoft Gen AI tools and how organizations can use those to build fairly cost-effective solutions. Ryan? Ryan, I think you're on mute.
Apologies. Sorry. Thanks, Rajiv. So if we take a step back to about a year ago, before ChatGPT really took off, and you imagine me standing there in front of you, highlighting the promise of giving you access to a personal assistant that is the brightest, most creative, and most knowledgeable entity on the planet. One, you'd probably call me crazy, but two, how much would you be willing to pay for that? Well, that is exactly what Microsoft Copilot offers. And it's integrated across our entire ecosystem, as you can see here on the screen. Copilot is built directly into our apps and fits in seamlessly into our daily work routines. It has use cases that span across all roles within an organization, providing that seamless integration across our product stack while leveraging existing security postures and classification rules. And the beauty of this is really that our AI journey begins within the comfort of our existing working environments. So additionally, Azure OpenAI services are accessible via Azure, should you need to fully unlock the value of the stack. And thanks to our partnership with OpenAI, we have model parity. And as the undisputed leader in this space, our first mover advantage now becomes your first mover advantage, allowing you to separate yourselves from those who still remain apprehensive. And when we talk about the cost effectiveness of Copilot, you can see here that it is truly remarkable. Research shows that the average annual cost of an employee is around $70,000, which translates to an hourly rate of $33.65. Now, when you consider the monthly cost of a Copilot license, which is just $30, we can start to calculate the return on investment based on the amount of time an employee can actually save utilizing Copilot. So with 1 hour saved, that translates to a 12% ROI. By 5 hours saved, that jumps up to 68%. 2 hours, comes out to 124%, and 2.5 hours saves with 180% ROI. Now, there's also these highly proficient users of Copilot who can actually save an average of 10 hours per month. And that translates to a staggering 1,000% plus ROI. And this reduction in time spent on repetitive tasks allows employees to accomplish tasks more quickly and efficiently, leading to those lower operational costs and truly underscoring Copilot as that cost-effective solution for businesses. And Rajiv, I'll send it back over to you to talk about the actual implementation of these generative AI solutions.
Yep, thanks, Ryan. And that's really impressive in terms of ROI that I talked about. We did have a quick question over here, so maybe if you can just look at. So this is from Arti. And and really the question is that, are there any initiatives to comply with industry standards for generative AI? One output for user may not be applicable or valid for another output for another user. So I guess there are two parts to the question. One is around industry standards, and the other one is kind of customizing it for users.
I would need some clarification on industry standard, but the one output for not being applicable for another user, that's the beauty of Copilot and these generative AI tools, is that it can be adapted to any environment, any role, any organization.
Yeah, and I
comment for the first part there.
Yeah, so when it comes to industry standards, more so than that, even if we think about it at a wider level globally, overall as citizens in the planet, as you know, like in the European Union, there are different regulations, which is an example why certain devices like the new iPhone reaches the EU without any of those AI features enabled. We have yet to fully agree at a global level, and this is outside of just tech. Tech has a role to play in this, but it's actually the nation states that need to come forth in terms of regulation, and regulation will then be the forebearers in terms of what industry standards are then adapted, because it's pointless developing an industry standard that may be in conflict with what regulation asks for in terms of compliance. So I believe that is the preceding step. We have still a way to go. What I can say is many of the larger OEMs, Microsoft included, are open to, and if anything, are calling for regulation. So there's a common set of rules against which we can develop ethical AI. No, so like ISO? No, not yet. Once again, it is completely linked to regulation and compliance. So if you think about those standards, Arti, in terms of ISO and so forth, they were driven out against the backdrop of being compliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Cree. Yeah, so kind of then jumping into the implementation aspect, how do we look at implementing frugally? So the key idea over here is to, again, make it a very iterative, agile process, conduct lots and lots of experiments. The moment you identify a particular use case, we typically try to limit the experiments to 8 to 16-hour experiments, not kind of stretch them out quite a bit, and utilize tools like ChatGPT, Copilot Studio, Azure AI Studio. These are fantastic tools, with which you can do these experimentations. And what we are trying to do in these experiments are just figuring out whether this use case even makes sense or not. Is generative AI able to help in this particular use case? Whatever experiments are successful, then we move it to a POC stage. And again, we limit these POCs to 40-hour POCs. These are just proof of concept. And the key idea in the POC is to get a sense of, okay, if we were to do a production deployment, what does that architecture really look like? What elements do we need to put into place? Because again, it's not just about getting the solution, but the solution should be scalable. It should be secure. So those are the kind of things that we check in the POC. And once we have done that, then what we want to do is look at also the cost aspect, right? So as far as the cost is concerned, there what we are looking at is that if we were to put into production, what is it going to cost? Because some of these implementations can be significantly expensive given the token cost. Once we have successful POC candidates, then that's when we start doing limited rollouts. We learn from that, then we refine from them. And one of the things that we have been doing also is to make sure that we do internal implementations before doing external implementations, because these technologies are still not fully understood. we really want to make sure that we test them out. So those are some of the things that we want to we do to make sure that these implementations that we are doing are cost effective. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we also want to bake in the iteration aspect. We The priorities can change, technology, as we can see, we have been seeing, can advance, costs may drop. So right now, whatever roadmaps we are developing, we are making sure that we review them at least once every month to look at whether that still makes sense to go with the roadmap that we had, or do we need to alter that roadmap. So the way we have put all these together really is through this implementation approach that we think works. And we really start with education of senior executives, education of functional leaders, education of all the employees. And that's where Zyton offers these customized boot camps and training sessions. Like you talked about, what we did at Gaiatech or what we did at Pinchin. So these were all kind of customized sessions to impart education. And once that is in place, then we can also help out in terms of doing the AI assessment and diagnostic to identify opportunities and help the organization create the roadmaps. And this is kind of a living roadmap of all the initiatives that have been identified, along with a program management framework that's put on top of it, right? Once that happens, then we can help in the deployment. Again, the cycle that we typically use is start with, as I said, lots of experiments, do proof of concept, do deployments, and then use that feedback to kind of keep refining our entire AI program with the program management tools set in place. So again, we could help with the program management aspect. And finally, there are a lot of things that also need to be done from an enablement perspective, generating the executive sponsorship, creating the Gen AI vision, the strategy, the policies, and also looking at the budget and change management aspect. That's where we offer some of the fractional AI services, right? So that's really the approach that we have, and we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So before we kind of look at concluding this session, maybe we just look at these questions. So Rahil has asked this question: how do we ensure scalability in AI implementation for SMBs with limited budget? So great question, Rahil, and that's where we were talking about how do we do it frugally. I think the key thing over here is to use that cycle of lots of experiments, filter it into proof of concept, and then only look at deploying those solutions which make sense and which are cost effective, right? Let's look at another question or comment we have from Marlon. Hey, Marlon, nice to see you here. Yeah, okay. So that's just a comment from Marlon. So yeah, it's been amazing to work with you, Marlon, and of course, Cree and Ryan are amazing resources to be on the call. So yeah, thanks a lot for that comment. So with that, really, we're kind of coming to the end of this particular session, and what I wanted to kind of highlight really is that if we look at where we are, in terms of the generative AI roadmap, I think we have heard from Cree, Ryan, that it's here to stay. It's not something that's just a fad and it's going to go away, because we are seeing the kind of investments and benefits from it. Of course, Microsoft as well as Zyton, we are totally committed to support SMBs in accelerating their journey with all the fantastic tools that Ryan, you talked about. And yes, I think the other thing also was that we do have a special offer for all the participants of this webinar, which is that I'll be posting a survey in the link after the webinar. And if you respond to that, we are happy to offer you a complimentary 30-minute consultation with myself, where we can review what you're doing in terms of your AI roadmap and how you can improve. So yeah, so with that, we're coming to the end of time over here. Any final thoughts, Cree, Ryan, that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so fantastic, and I love what Zyton's doing in terms of serving our SMB communities. To the SMBs that are on this call and those that may be listening to a recording later on, the advantage that you have as SMBs is how nimble and agile you are, and the ability that you have to adopt technology and really use it as a force multiplier. This is genuinely the first time in our history that we've had technology this powerful that comes in at such an attractive price point, allowing you to genuinely push up into the enterprise segments and beyond. So with that, really take this journey seriously, because it is an opportunity for you to really reimagine your business and in many ways supercharge it with these AI capabilities.
Thanks, Kree. Also, I think there's one more question from Rahil. Thanks for your response. Lastly, I would like to know, are there any specific industry sectors or business functions where you have seen generative AI deliver the most impactful results for SMBs? So I think, we are kind of out of time over here. So Rahil, if you can connect with me one-on-one, I can definitely share that with you. Yes, there are certain industries where the impact is more. High tech is one of those. Software industry is one of those where the impact is maximum. But then we are also seeing a huge amount of impact in education, in financial services, in healthcare. And I think it's slightly more by function also. So when we're looking at functions like customer service, there is a huge amount of impact that generative AI already has had. Also in terms of anything that involves document generation, document processing. So yeah, it's the winners or the winning use cases are emerging. And we would be happy to connect one-to-one with you and kind of talk to you about those particular use cases. Feel free to book that consultation, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Okay. Thanks, Kree. Thanks, Ryan, for being here. This was absolutely amazing, and loved having conducting the webinar along with you. And thanks everyone who attended. Remember, you have the free consultation offer. You have the support of Microsoft and Zyton to accelerate your AI initiatives, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.